Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Sunday afternoon. I hope you're enjoying this beautiful Sunday. Frankly, I hope you're not watching this video. I hope you'll catch it later, and I hope you're outside enjoying the sun, although it is a little warm. I hope you'll enjoy today, eating well, enjoying the outdoors, and some time with family, hopefully. And then I hope that'll leave you some time tomorrow to celebrate Memorial Day and to really remember those that we should. Our military is an amazing force. Their families give up so much for them to protect us, and I do hope you'll spend a little bit of time, take a break from the burgers and the beers and such, and give a little thought to those that are making our days and our peace here possible. I want to start by, I've got to start with Congressman Chip Roy. This guy needs to get a kick in the shins bigger than life. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Congressman Chip Roy is a congressman from Texas. He's a Republican. And he is the single person that has held up a $19 billion disaster relief bill in Congress. While most of Congress had left town, so they couldn't call everybody back for a vote, the Senate has passed this bill. The House, it's got overwhelming support there, but due to some little glitches, they were trying to pass this by unanimous consent, which means everybody's got to agree. So we got one clown that says he's not going to vote for it. And so you've got one person that's responsible for holding up all of the relief to our area and to so many others. That's the bad news. And I would like for everybody out there to contact Chip Roy's office. You're apparently not able to email him if you're outside his district. His voicemail fills up rather frequently, but I think we all ought to stay on it, and we all ought to express our displeasure. Florida has been very supportive of Texas, particularly we were supportive of Houston after Hurricane Katrina. We've been supportive of them following the floods, and for Texas to kind of take a swipe at us like this, I just think is beyond the pale. I think it's a little ridiculous, and I think it's very hypocritical of Congressman Roy. If you look at any of his statements in the past about disaster relief, he talks about how it should be done immediately, it should be done without any problem, without any riders, without anything hitching on to these bills. And that's great to say, but then when it comes down to something important like this, then you go full hypocrite and you go the other direction. I hope you will express your displeasure. We're going to post all of his information, his public information, his office numbers both in Washington and in his district, and I hope you'll contact either his Washington office or his district office and explain to them what he's done completely unnecessarily to Northwest Florida. I will give you something a little more positive, however. I have been in touch with Congressman Neil Dunn's office. For those of you that don't know, he is our representative in Congress, and I've been assured that this is a delay, not something that's going to make this money go away. There's particularly a good bit of money for Tyndall Air Force Base, which comes as great news. The rebuilding of Tyndall needs to be a very, very high priority. That's a big economic engine for our area, and that will be particularly crucial to the east side of town, which has really, really suffered. Not that we all haven't, but we know, I think, that Callaway and over toward Mexico Beach bore the brunt of this storm even worse than those of us in maybe Lynn Haven or Panama City. So again, Neil Dunn's office has been very, very active in trying to get funding both for our area and for Tyndall, and I've been assured that this is simply a delay and that as soon as they come back from their Memorial Day break, the House will take this up immediately and vote it through, and President Trump has agreed to sign it. So I think the good news is money is finally on the way after more than 200 days. However, one guy, for whatever his personal reasons, decided that he could take it upon himself among everybody in Congress to hold up our funding, and I think we should express what that means to us. I'd like to take a little bit different spin this week. I realize we've been off the air for a week, and we've not talked in quite some time, and I've not really talked much about condos. Condo associations weren't really terribly affected during this storm. Normally, you know, when we go through hurricanes, we're used to the beach getting hammered, and in town tends to fare somewhat better. This was the opposite. Obviously, we took it a lot harder over here on the east side of the bridge. However, there are people having some difficulties with condo associations and homeowner associations. There are unique issues because you have as many as 200 of your closest friends around you, and they all kind of have to get along one way or another if you're going to make any progress. And there are condos here. There's Marina Bay, Inland Haven, We've got one at the end of Beck Avenue, both in town. The one on Beck Avenue suffered some significant damage. And I would like to sort of express that there's been some fairly wild accusations, but there have been some, I think, that bear some merit. The first thing I'd like for those of you that are in a condo situation to remember is you have a condo board that is responsible for dealing with all of this difficulty. I would suggest and I would recommend that you try, where it's possible, to be somewhat patient with them for this reason. Number one, they're volunteers. Number two, there are a lot of these people who are very energetic, but they don't really have the business skill set to navigate something as complicated as an insurance claim. And so you're going to have to let them seek outside help, seek some counsel, and maybe to learn some lessons on the fly. So what I would say is cut them a little bit of slack if you can. Now, if you feel like there are things that are really being manipulated and playing badly, if you really feel like somebody is committing fraud or something pretty extraordinary, bear something in mind that every condo association board out there is required to carry what's called directors and officers, or D&O insurance, which means if you have a problem and you think they're genuinely behaving badly, that you can pursue their insurance without sort of, there are people that see what they perceive to be fraud, and they don't want to pursue it, and they don't want to sort of go against the board because, frankly, they think they're suing themselves. And while that's certainly true, at least in principle, what you're doing is you're saying that the board is not acting in the best interest of all the homeowners, and there is insurance that stands behind that. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're suing yourself. You are sort of putting yourself in a kind of an untenable position in some cases, but in most cases it's simply you are challenging the governance of your association, and if you do so in a legal way, there's directors and officers insurance again that will pay both for the defense of the board, and if there's something that needs to be paid on behalf of the board or on behalf of the association, that D&O policy should do it. So don't feel like you're suing yourself and you're going to cost yourself money if you do something like this, if you decide to pursue it. But if you can, cooperation is always the best policy. And if you can get along, if you can even help your board of directors to see things the right way, and if you can bring in professionals if need be for a fee in some cases, then do that if it's possible. Whether you're a condo, homeowner, business owner, whatever, we've talked several times about the appraisal process, and I mentioned it a little bit in my previous episode. By the way, we're on episode 50. Today is 50 episodes of this. Who'd have thought that would have happened? But I would say this, that when you're dealing with the appraisal process, a lot of people have very strong feelings about appraisal. I have expressed my concern that people use caution when approaching the appraisal process, because the appraisal process generally is binding. There are exceptions to this, but generally when you go to appraisal, when two appraisers of the three come to the same number, that's the number that everyone is stuck with, whether you like it or not. And the only way to get around appraisal is really to go to court, and you have a really high bar to clear if you have an appraisal process that has gone legally. You really genuinely have to prove something pretty extraordinary in court to have an appraisal award thrown out. You have to look at collusion or fraud or something usually pretty drastic. So if you go to the appraisal process, you have to realize that may move things along very, very quickly. It may be effective for you, but it's also final. So be sure. When I say be sure, I mean this. Before you go to appraisal, before you invoke that, do your homework. You need to have a good estimate from someone, have your engineering done or an outside inspection done, all of the outside work that you need to do, all the experts that you need to get together. This is a data-driven process. You're going to a process a little bit like court. You have to prove your case better than the other guy. Remember that insurance companies do this all the time. So what they're going to do is they're going to show up to court knowing what to do, and they're going to have their data in hand. They're going to have their estimate. They're going to have their building consultant's report. They're going to have their engineering reports. So you need to have yours, because if it's just you, a poor homeowner, standing up against all these experts, it's not going to go very well for you. So again, I'm going to say this one more time: do your homework. As I say with almost everything in this process, do your homework. Load up really good before you pull the trigger. I want to come back to something that I posted about earlier in the week, and that's about deductible and coverage changes. We all know what's coming up in a week. We all know what begins again. I'm not even gonna mention it by name because I don't want to call it into existence. However, now is a good time, right before the beginning of the season again. If you want to make changes to your coverage, if it's possible, now is the right time. Number one, if you feel like you didn't have enough insurance after the storm, even if you didn't suffer for that, if you feel like, wow, if I'd had worse damage, I could have really had myself in trouble, then now's the time to talk to your agent and to boost those limits of insurance. If you feel like you had too much for some reason, I have to tell you, I don't have any people, none of my clients are coming to me saying they had too much insurance, although there are a few that think, maybe I need to bump these limits a little bit. Now's the time. Also, you kind of need to think about this too, that if you had significant damage and if you're getting toward the end of your rebuild process, your home may be worth a good bit more than it was before. And we've all seen that rebuilding in the wake of a storm costs a ton more. It could be 50 or 100% more than in normal times. So let's think about what my industry terms demand surge, and let's look at what it may cost you to build in this environment rather than in normal times, because obviously, we're worried about the next big storm. The other thing I want to mention is deductibles. Those 2 and 3% deductibles, in some cases 5% deductibles, some of those stung, they bit. So what I would suggest to you is most insurance companies, not all, but most insurance companies will allow you to buy down that deductible. And when I say buy down, I mean you can take a lower deductible, some even a flat dollar figure of $500 or $1,000 in some cases. And obviously that's going to cost you a little bit more because the insurance company has more exposure. While that's true, it may be worth it. In some cases, we're seeing that going from a 2% deductible to a $1,000 flat deductible costs very, very little money. In some cases, less than $100. That's not always the case. We've seen some of those cases where that price is over $1,000, and that certainly wouldn't be worth it. But what I would suggest to you is, until you ask, you don't know. You need to go talk to your agent, give them a call, ask them what your options are. Now realize that some insurance companies will have minimum deductibles that they'll allow for windstorm coverage or hurricane coverage. And if that's the case, they may not allow you to go below the deductible that you have now. You may be stuck at a 2 or 3 or a 5% deductible. If that's the case, you can also look at other insurance companies. Assuming, again, that you have your repairs done, there's no reason you can't look at other options right now. But what I'd like to focus on right now, again, is if you're staying with your insurance company and or if you have still have unrepaired damage and you need to stay with your current insurance company, ask about changing up your coverage and what those various levels of coverage would cost you. You may decide at the end of the day not to make any changes at all, that you're happy with the coverage that you have and the price. But again, until you ask, until you get the numbers, you just don't know. So now's the time to do this. Do this right now before we get into the meat of hurricane season and it's too late. Do it now while you're thinking about it. Finally, I mentioned this last week, and I've mentioned it a little bit in the past in some of my other posts. The fraud and abuse following Hurricane Michael is unlike that we've seen in any other storm. Whether it's Katrina, Wilma, Ivan, there's just been nothing like it. I spoke again with some fraud investigators this past week who confirmed for me things that I'd already been told. And I don't know why it is. I think some of it is that we in the Panhandle are trusting, that we haven't had to deal with the severity of damage that, say, Central and South Florida have. We're a little bit more rural area, and we had an awful lot more people have to come into the area from the outside than before. And I will tell you that we've seen some really, really bad behavior from some local contractors too. Most have been very, very good, don't get me wrong, but the bad behavior by those few has been very, very dramatic. And along these lines, the Florida Insurance Fraud Task Force is coming to town. They're going to deal with fraud issues, whether it's from an insurance company, a contractor, an agent, a public adjuster, wherever the source of the fraud or abuse. We're going to be dealing with law enforcement, special investigators. We're going to have folks there from Citizens Insurance Company, all of whom are very familiar with fraud, with technical issues, with law enforcement, and hopefully with how to stop and mostly how to spot fraud when it happens. I think a lot of folks have been victims of fraud and they saw it, but they saw it too late. What we're going to be able to do about it, I don't know. I'm going to be new to this little group, and I'll help present where I can add something to the conversation. But this conversation is going to happen next week on Saturday. It's going to be at St. Dominic's Church, Catholic Church on Panama City Beach. I've posted the details on our Facebook page here, and I'll continue to post them, and I'll push them out to the hurricane groups like Hurricane Michael Updates and some of the others. But I would encourage you to show up. If you're not going to be able to be there for some reason and you have a particular question or you have a specific situation you'd like for us to address, I'll be happy to take all of your information to law enforcement, to the fraud investigative units, to Department of Business and Professional Regulation, to whoever is there that can answer your questions. And I'll do my very best in person to get you a straight answer to your question or to find a solution to your problem. I probably am not the person to do it, but I can certainly try to get you there. Again, June 1st, next Saturday, it's going to start at 10 o'clock at St. Dominic's Catholic Church. Again, I hope you've had a nice day. I hope you'll enjoy the fact you get a nice long weekend. But I do hope you'll remember what's important about tomorrow. And on my way out, I'm going to give bonus points to anybody that can tell you the origin of this particular shirt and what it refers to. So if you have any thoughts, post them on our Facebook page. I have no idea what we'll do as far as giving any kind of prize, but we'll see. I just noticed that I had this thing on. So anyway, I hope you have a great week. We'll see you back Wednesday. Enjoy your day off work tomorrow.